What are talents? Are talents synonymous with technical skills you can develop? Are they something you're born with? Can you list or quantify talents, or are they simply the undefinable about a person? Depends on whom you ask. In Kenya, different institutions are known to nurture talents and are famous in the creative world. Let us dive into the story and get to know the progress of one of the most famous institutions in Kenya, the Kenya Cultural Center, incorporating the Kenya National Theatre.
From 1952, the government then, the colonial government then, felt there was need for a place where these soldiers would go for entertainment, issues of mental health. KCC, its inception, is a place for relief. But apart from that, as we relieve Kenyans of their burdens by providing entertainment, it has evolved to be a place of nurturing, developing, and even upholding talent. Because again, a lot of productions have happened here. A lot of artists have found a life from this stage, from this institution, and so many of those artists have launched their career from this institution.
When you talk about 1952, in terms of when you talk about the history, you're looking at 52 as the time when there was an emergency. This whole area was like white-only area. I mean, it's like you would have even white men taking pot shots at Africans and killing them on this road, Harikwiku Road. So this place basically was a white-only area, and no blacks ever performed here.
Since the beginning of the colony, this concerted effort to say that Africans have no civilization. Civilization is why the British came, the civilizing mission. We've come to make you civilized human beings. So even though we're going to, at some point, pull out, we must keep control and make you believe that civilization is what the British have brought. And so what they decided to do, and this is even before you have the state of emergency or, as they see things changing, is that they decide that they're going to put up a cultural center. Now you might ask, why a cultural center? Because if you believe, as our constitution says, that culture is the sum of your civilizations. It is the highest that you can aspire to. The idea was that the cultural center was going to remain and show Kenyans what British culture would be and what they should continue to aspire to.
The Kenya Cultural Center was therefore established and was officially opened in 1952 by Governor Richard Frost. From 1952 to 1962, the KCC was exclusively for the British. Performances were by the British and for the British. They played The Dark Lady of the Sonnets. A short comedy by George Bernard Shaw was performed at the opening. During this period, there were many productions churned out as propaganda against the Mau Mau. However, these were mainly films.
When you have all this, the Mau Mau, then the struggle for independence, the state of emergency is called. Important things that happened. Number one, as you know, next door to the Kenya Cultural Center is the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. That was set up because you had British soldiers coming in to fight, and they needed to keep in touch with news from home. You had the Norfolk across the road, the hotel, and the idea was that, let's site it here because when the settlers come in, they can just walk across the road and go and experience British culture. And so in its beginnings, this space was set up as a space that was supposed to be the heart of Kenya culture, but Kenya culture as experienced through Britain. At the bottom, down the road as you go, you remember there is that what we call the Central Police Station. And if you ask what is Central, not to think about it today, it's actually at the edge of the city. But that police station was put there to stop Africans from coming into this space. Again, think about it, it was protecting the cultural heart, and you can go all the way up to the National Museums of Kenya.
In 1959, the schools' drama festivals were launched at KCC, and they were also exclusively for British schools. The state of emergency ended on 12th of January 1960. In 1963, Kenya attained independence. However, the KCC remained firmly in the grip of the British.
As you come into the 60s, an interesting thing is happening. Kenya is changing. We are seeing an African government coming into power now. A very interesting thing happened. In 1963, when the government of the independent Kenya took over from the British government had no space to put culture. There was no Ministry of Culture. There was nothing dealing with anything to do with culture or the arts. So the Kenya Cultural Center and the National Theatre kind of fell in the cracks. There was nobody to hand over. And because the new government had so much else it was doing, it left the center in the hands of the British Council. The British Council ran the center through a governing council, and the members that had been drawn, if you want, the constituent members who had been drawn, who had an annual general meeting, they continued to run the affairs for a very long time.
In 1968, due to the concern about the British running KCC, the first African assistant director was appointed. In the same year, Seth Adagala was appointed as the first African director of KCC.
There was a film that was brought here at the Kenya National Theatre, The Kenya We Want. Now that movie, The Kenya We Want, was done by it was a KBC thing, okay, now that time BOK, and they wanted to show that it was the time for Africanization. And the then minister, I think the foreign minister at that time, was Tom Mboya, who was here. There was Mongai. They all came here to celebrate and see what Kenya has done in the last 5 years. And somebody asked, why is the Kenya National Theatre still being run under the British? So it was high time they also wanted to have an African director running the place.
James Falkland had been appointed the manager of the theatre, and they said, no, we demand an African. The Kenya Cultural Center, because it is the heart of who we are as a people, we must be able to see ourselves all the way, including in management. And so finally, later on in that year, 1968, the first director of the Kenya Cultural Center and the National Theatre, Seth Adagala, was appointed. And it really is at that point with Seth Adagala there, it wasn't easy for him, and we must then think about this space as a site of struggle, that we began to see the academics across at the university and the artists at the Kenya Cultural Center and the National Theatre really beginning to fight for control of the space, for Africanization of the space.
His first task was to rejuvenate the drama school, and this time there was a deliberate attempt to reach out to Africans. In 1969, graduates of the National Theatre drama schools dared to bring African stage plays to the KCC. The Black Hermit by Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Sons and Daughters by Joe de Graft. The first African play to be performed in the main auditorium was Wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel in 1970. In 1973, the first musical by an African, Otisi, was staged at KCC main auditorium, Kivuta Kibwana. In 1977, 2 plays by Africans were selected for the Festivals of Black Arts and Culture, FESTAC. These were Trial of Dedan Kimathi by Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Betrayal in the City by Francis Imbuga. The government clamped down on artistic activities which were now even more political. There was therefore a lull in public activities at the KCC. The clampdown was still ongoing though. It was then mandatory to get a license from the government before staging any play.
This is the time where you start to see the National Theatre becoming very rundown. It is starved for resources. Because there is a lot of censorship, they said that you had to get a license to perform anywhere outside the schools or religious spaces.
In 1992 to 2002, performances from examinable texts from schools, popularly known as setbooks, became main event at KCC-NT. It was also in this period that the Ministry of Culture started forwarding managers to the KCC-NT. In 2002 to 2012, the political space was now a bit more tolerant. Generally, this led to the introduction of the stand-up comedy in the Kenyan art scene. Plays in vernacular also made a comeback, with Luo and Kikuyu plays leading the charge. Between the period of 2012 to 2022, the center conducted key events, and this was the festivals and award era that had an impact on the theatre industry. Among those that were launched and held at KCC-NT were Sanaa Theatre Awards, Riverwood Awards, and the Kenya International Theatre Festival. On the KCC grounds, there were many performers, including percussionists, stand-up comedians, and spoken word artists practice and own their art. During this period, practicing artists got into management as they were appointed as the directors or managers, and others sat in the governing council.
The biggest happening that I can be able to register for the Kenya Cultural Center National Theatre is the turnaround, the institutional turnaround in terms of making the facilities be relevant with the kind of performance demands and creative activities demands of the times.
In March 2020, a worldwide pandemic, COVID-19, necessitated the shutdown of KCC-NT for almost 2 years. Theatre activities resumed in mid-2021. The Kenya Cultural Center offers an array of facilities for diverse creative expression to ensure good progress, success, and comfortability of the talents, including the Kenya National Theatre, Ukumbi Mdogo, Cheche Gallery of Visual Arts, Dance Studio, Classroom / Rehearsal Space, and Mugumo Central Courtyard.
We will have legacy projects that will outlive us, that our children will look back and say, the men and women who were present when Kenya was 50 did this for our country.
Kenya Cultural Center should actually be a cultural reference point. Anything that is cultural, anything that is performance, then people would come to the Kenya Cultural Center to experience those world-class performances which represent our culture, but also experience any other performance that would be of international standards in nature.
A booking office was operationalized and mostly meant for selling tickets and vendor permits.
It's among the latest additional offices to be set up in KCC, and I'm saying that because it was operationalized last year in October 2021, because there was need to transition from the manual ticketing from the reception desk to an actual office. So typically what we do is administer and verify tickets to the numerous shows that we have in the main auditorium.
Bookings in the center are done via email in order for clients to secure space, and there will be a prompt to confirm the dates and be guided on how to go about the payments.
You have to let us know of the proposed dates that you want. We check on the booking calendar, see if it's available or they are available, and then from there we will give you the go-ahead by sending you a quotation, upon which you're supposed to pay at least 50% of the money on the quotation.
The Kenya Cultural Center is a home of great services. Customer relations is a key point in provision of services to the creatives.
In line with the new curriculum, we're supposed to nurture talent, and we realize that many of our learners are very good in arts, and for us is to explore and come into the National Theatre for them to see how a stage looks like, the lighting, the mics, and everything that a theatre has to offer. And at the Cultural Center, we've come and we've gotten all what we wanted under one roof.
Through the mentorship and networking program, The performance after lunch Pearl, different upcoming artists are glad to share the experiences.
Between the year 2010 and 2016, I happened to be the executive director, that is the CEO of the Kenya Cultural Center, National Theatre. So I managed this institution during those years. And it is during that particular period of time that Pearl came to be.
We used to call it free lunchtime entertainment because it ran from 1 to 3. So that when people in town are free or are enjoying their lunch break, they could come and feed on word, which we used to serve freely. Before Hare Krishna came in to provide physical lunch.
Pearl ni poetry after lunch, but inabeba vitu mingi. Wewe unaweza kuwa storyteller, unaweza kuwa nini, monologue. You can do it on stage. Hivyo.
Pearl is an open platform where many people come na wana watch. So the more like uki perform, watu wanakuona and nasema oh this girl tukiwa na event naweza mwita, so watu wanaku approach hivyo. That's how I've been able to get many gigs through Pearl.
Truly, growth is exceptional and is easily visible in Kenya Cultural Center.
Kenya Cultural Center is for the artists, and it is an institution that the government has put for their use to develop the creative sector. But then there is the need for responsible use, because then responsible use makes the use sustainable and makes the artist that comes tomorrow have the space. So we would encourage the artists, let's use the space. You are welcome to use the space, but we are using it responsibly as we have done in the past. Kenya Cultural Center is the oldest cultural institution in the country. We need to note that. And having gone through several problems, in 1952 there was the Mau Mau, so there was a problem within the space. Having gone through, these ups and downs as an institution, it is just important to look back and see what have we done within the 70 years and just celebrate those achievements. So yes, as the oldest cultural institution, there's need for celebration. Looking back and looking at the way we have struggled and survived the problems, there's need for celebration. And 70 years is not a small feat. So yes, we just need to celebrate 70 years as an institution.
The Kenya Cultural Center, a home of talents.